hope you're super psyched. I hope you're super pumped up right now because it is going to be an amazing show. It's going to be totally awesome. It is the Monday, March 28th edition of PaleocratDiaries, and I am your host, Jeremiah Bannister. Ow! Come on! We got to rock it out. Why? Because today is the day that the Lord has made. We're going to rejoice. We are going to rejoice. We're going to be glad in it. We're going to be glad in it. You know why? Because Christ is King. We're going to take a knee for him. We're going to commit every single thought, word, and deed to the restoration of all things in him. Why? All power, all authority, right now. Right now. There's nothing to fear. There's nothing to fear. We got reason to hope. We got reason to be super pumped. And we have a commitment to make. Every single show, we commit to this. Never give up. Keep on smiling. And remember that we too, one day, shall die. And in the meantime, what do we do? What do we do in the meantime? That's a big deal. We're all going to die. But we're here right now. So what do? Dream bigger thoughts. Give it all you've got. Pray with all your might. Figure out what you got to do. And once you've done that, once you've beat down those doors over and over and over, and the Lord has spoken, you have to do it. You got to do it. Speaking of God and to do it, I hope you've got that coffee ready right about, let's see, now. Right now. Get that coffee, get that straw, howl at the sun, S-O-N. Because he has saved you, and there ain't no reason to be afraid, and there's no reason to be ashamed. You're a child of the King. And over here at the Wolf Pack, we're super pumped. Today, we're going to be talking about mystics and messiahs, spiritualism, all that. And right after the show, we've got a Q&A. So you got to be there. All the links are down in the description below. Every single one of them. Oh, boy, we're going to have a good time. By the way, sorry that I'm late. Is my mouth off right now? Is my mouth off right now? It better not be. It better not be. I worked with a guy for 2 hours trying to figure out the mic situation so that we can begin having regular interviews, live interviews. And there's difficulties with some of it because of latency issues. And for people who don't know much about tech, that's just fancy talk for stuff that totally bites. It is terrible. It is terrible. And so we worked on it for 2 hours. I want to thank Ian for that. I want to thank him. I want to thank everybody, by the way, real quick. Let's just go right away to the chat. If you would like, make sure today when you post a comment, make sure to go ahead and put at Paleocrat. If somebody could just do that right now, that way everybody can see exactly what is going on with that. And that way they'd be able to, let me just check one thing real quick. I apologize. It's driving me a little bit bonkers. Just a little, it's itsy bit bonkers. There we go. We'll do it like that. Why not? Okay. So let's go back up in this pack here. Alexander, good to see you, bud. Good to see you with the crowns and the wolf and the coffee. Nice to see you there. Dude, every time. Weinschel. Is it Weinschel? I'm just gonna call you Wine. Is it okay? Can I call you Wine? It sounds better than Ween. I don't want to call you Ween. Hey, Ween. Don't want to do it. Bethany. Good to see you, Bethany. Glad to see you smiling. Super pumped. Sam, you and all of your wolf pals. Hopefully that is because you have done a very good job of liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. And if you guys haven't done that yet, please do it. It definitely helps 100%. So make sure to go ahead and do that. Yeah, Jesse, good to see you. And dude, I am sorry we still have not coordinated a day to get together for the show. Let's see. Kevin, Reason and Theology. I put away my monocle. Instead, I have coffee straw to the dome. Looking forward to another great show from the Kaisha. Yes, dude. It's going to be a good show. We give it our best every single time. Every single time. Iggy says, hi, everyone. Glad to be here live. A benefit of Second Shift. Isn't that cool, man? Isn't that cool to be able to say that one of the benefits to your work schedule is that you can tune in to the show? You can tune in live. And you're like, yeah, it's actually one of the reasons why. You're like pushing for it, you know? You're pushing for it. And you're like, yeah, I really want to be able to tune in live. And they're like, what do you want to do? And they're like, PaleocratDiaries. And they're like, oh yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, we get a lot of that. A lot of people requesting that. So let me see one more thing real quick. Forgive me for that. All right. Okay. So Only a couple more comments left here. Rachel, yes. Hello, I was worried. I was late, but Kaiser Standard has my back. Kaiser Standard Time always has your back. And for those who don't know, Kaiser Standard Time is the time that revolves around your boy. Your boy right here. So if it's 10:30 and it shows up at 10:35, Kaiser Standard Time. If it's supposed to be at 11 o'clock and it shows up at 11:15, Kaiser Standard Time. So Kaiser Standard Time has always got your back, unless, of course, you want to be really prompt. And in that case, you should check, like, Central Standard Time or something. And that's fake. So, yeah, don't worry about that. Let's see. Rachel says, my husband was in Bodo just last week. Not entirely sure. Don't know. Oh, maybe you're talking to somebody else. Okay, let's see. Good morning. I'm going to sue Brother Jeremiah for making us wait. Tom, you will lose because in Kaiserland, I have the final say on that. So you're not going to be able to sue me. Good luck, buddy. Good luck. I'm going to get money from you for suing me and wasting my time. So don't do that. Wasting my time that I just wasted yours. So, all right. Woohoo. The music in the intro are Fire Brother Jeremiah. All right. Anyway, very glad. And of course, right there you can see, do I have to adopt a paleo diet to be a paleocrat? No, you do not. Paleocrat, in fact, does not adopt a paleo diet. I have done a paleo diet before for like 2 weeks, and I'm like, nah, that's okay. I'll just stick with keto. So if you're gonna do paleo, then I say, look, if you're gonna do paleo, just do keto. Okay. Let's see here. We're gonna call it good with that. We got to move on. We got a lot to talk about today, so we can't be playing around for too long. I will be engaging with people in the comments. We'll go ahead and do that throughout the show. Let me move everything over here. And that way we've got all of it lined up and we are ready to rock. That way I've got my eyes on the prize, okay? That way I will be able, throughout the show, to see the comments, okay? So that'll be definitely a really, really cool thing to do. Let me make sure that I've got, okay, there we go. Good. All right. So here we go. Check this out. So I hope you got your coffee. I hope you got your coffee because this is the PaleocratDiaries alert system. This right here is the sound that unleashes the carrier pigeons. Okay? Carrier pigeons all the way to the north, all the way to the south, to the east and the west, all around the globe, to let them know the PaleocratDiaries is on the air. Right now, as I speak, people in England, in New York, in Dallas, in LA, in weird places in Canada, all over the place, Australia, Africa, doesn't matter, all around the world, people are notifying their neighbors that we are about to enter the octagon of history. Why? Because we got to figure out how we got here. We have to figure out what in the world is going on. And the only way to truly understand is to recognize the past and say, what led to this crazy place? What led to this wild predicament that I found myself in? Well, we're going to do that today by going through a little bit of this. Mystics and Messiahs. We're going to talk about Mormons, just a little eatsy. We're going to talk about spiritualism. We're going to talk about the Native American round dance. We're going to talk about the anti-cult movement and what exactly happened. So you have to let everybody know right now. Get out that shofar. Get out that conch. Get out that didgeridoo and the xylophone and the hammer dulcimer and the snare drum and blast it out, letting them know that they've got to tune in right now. Or, well, later. Either way, they've got to tune in. They've got to tune in, and they've got to resolve today as they listen and as they work and as they live and as they play. They have to resolve deep down inside that they are never going to give up. They're going to learn, they're going to live, and they're going to love. And they're going to do everything they've got to dream bigger thoughts, to embrace that powerful mandate, that optimistic eschatology that said that God uses us in real time for great deeds. Every day, Johnny Q and Sally Sue in the Catholic pews. Super psyched. Learning, living, loving, all for Him. Making the world better, one little thing, one ordinary thing done in an extraordinary way. Because it's your gift, it's your talent, it's your friend and your family, your neighbor, your classmate, your coworker. Doesn't matter. It's all of them. It's all of them. And you are giving everything you've got. Oh, man. Yeah, megaphones, enslaved by truth. It's like, I'm just going for the megaphone, homie. I'm just going for the megaphone. I don't know what you guys are talking about. Didgeridoo. didgeridoing it up. And people are like, oh, dude, what's that? And you're like, PaleocratDiaries. I'm like, of course. That's right. You do that every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. With the didgeridoo. The hammered dulcimer, man. You got to just imagine some dude on a street corner playing the hammered dulcimer. And people are like, oh, are you wanting some money? And you're like, no, I want you to get on your phone right now. And I want you to go tune in to Reason and Theology and to Meaning of Catholic so that you can tune into my boy. Who's your boy? It's the Kaiser. Who's the Kaiser? It's my boy. So, oh, man. Oh. We have too much fun here. We have too much fun, you know. People are like, I don't understand this guy. I don't understand this guy. What's he all about? Why is he acting this way? Because we're psyched. Because we are legitimately pumped up for the Lord, aren't we? We're pumped up for God. You know, we sit there and we say, it's one of these things where you say, man, you know, it's a powerful thing just to be alive. And it's a great mandate that we have to do our best and to realize that we're made in the likeness and image of God. And that we have this great adventure in front of us. And this great adventure, we don't know when it's going to end. It can end for me. It can end for you. It can end for any of us today, tomorrow. We don't know. Okay, I mean, technically I could be on the show and all of a sudden and fall over, you know what I mean? Choking on my coffee, I drink it. I'm like, oh, it went down the wrong tube. And you're like, wow, it's a lot. I'm like, and you're like, what happened? In the corner is like, he died from drinking, you know, too much coffee straight to the dome. And you're like, he did a good job. He went out with style. But you never know. You never know how you're going to go. And so we really do need to know, you know, why are we here? What are we doing? Right? How do we live the best we can, not just to survive, but legitimately to thrive? And the way that we have figured out how to do that is to learn together, to pray together, and to learn from each other, to pool our resources in our hearts and minds, whether it's through prayer, whether it's through sharing testimony, whether it's through, you know, reaching out to others with advice, whatever it is, that we figured it out. And that's why, again, I have to encourage you after the show, every program after we're done, we go straight over to Telegram. There's a t.me/the Wolfpack Chat. We have a live Q&A, and it's really cool. It lasts for about an hour. Sometimes we go an hour that we record it, and then once it's over, we just leave it for live chat. You do not have to be in the chat. You don't have to like talk or anything. You know, you can talk. You can be on the video if you want. You can participate. You can ask questions. You know, raise criticisms. You can raise criticisms. There's no problem with that. And so, you know, it's one of those things. So we're really excited about that. It's one of the great parts of the show. And not just during the show, but throughout the week. I talked to somebody yesterday and was like, dude, you know, one of the great things, actually I think it was the first day that he was even there. His name's Christian. And first day he's in the chat and I ended up talking to him for like an hour and a half. And people say that all the time. They're like, dude, you know, I heard Jeremiah like will actually like call people up and stuff. And he'll talk to people. And it's like, dude, not only will I talk to you, I'll talk to you sometimes for a long time. You know, and I've made a lot of really great friends this way through this because I'm sick and tired of being stuck in the comment sections. I'm sick and tired of people feeling like they're just a fan. And by a fan, I mean a name. And by a name, I mean just symbols on a screen. Nothing to the person that makes the videos. And I'm sick and tired of being the person that makes the videos that sees and knows those are people there. And yet I don't do anything with them. And so I've tried really hard to make sure that that's a much different experience for people here. And we live by that. We are evidence of that. Okay? And so it makes it deep, really pumped up. All right. So we got to get to it. We got to get to it. All right. So I was saying last time we talked about, well, what did we talk about last time? We talked about the different groups, for example, sex magic. We did not talk on the show about some of those details. We saved it for the Telegram chat because it was a little bit risque. You're like, yeah, we're going to talk about sex magic. And all the parents are like, what? This is a family-friendly show. And you're like, I know, but we are talking cults. And that really is legit part of that. And so we talked about different groups, talked about different prophets, different people who believed that they had to lead the way. We talked about the Quakers. We talked about Mesmer, okay? Talked about a whole bunch of different folks. And what's an enthusiast? What's a fanatic? What's a sect? What's a cult? And if you really want to get deep down in that, you gotta go check out the snake handler videos. that I made. And yes, we did talk about the snake handlers. So if you're like, dude, is this guy serious? Yes, I'm very serious. We really talked about it. And it was actually an awesome couple videos there. We talked about the person who inspired Jack Chick. We talked about how the Roman Catholic Church in the United States was the first church that really caused an eruption of quote unquote anti-cult activity, even political. It was a movement, right? At different times, you had major time movements against the Catholic Church, and the kind of narrative that was formed at that time became boilerplate. In other words, from that point on, it was like ad libs. You just have to put in different names now, but the template's like the same. So you have a template and you have basic themes, okay? The authoritarian leader, the one that the secrecy that's involved, the priests or some kind of class of people that are trying to recruit individuals, separating families, right? Causing certain individuals to feel that they should spend the rest of their life in a cloister. And the idea of escaping or defecting from that. The sensational stories that come from defectors that all too often end up being fake. And that can be a real problem. It doesn't mean they're always fake, but a lot of times they are. And especially, a lot of times that's what people will make their living, being a defector in that way. And it is, in many ways, it's kind of the same thing. In atheist circles, you've got the deconvert, and in Christian circles, you have the conversion stories. I had a crazy conversion story. People have talked to me about it. There's multiple interviews online about it, but I've tried to say, look, that influences what I do. However, we are moving on beyond that. It's not all going to be wrapped up with that specific thing. And in fact, proof of that is that I rarely talk about, I have not talked very much about Calvinism, and that's what I was before I became a Catholic. And I don't talk about atheism, which is what because I fell away from the church and came back. And I don't talk much about atheism. I do at times when we talk about presuppositionalism, stuff like that. Okay, we'll do that. And so, but the idea being that ever since the earliest days, that is what we have been dealing with. Okay, so we've been dealing with kind of a boilerplate situation, kind of a basic template that that has provided for the rest of time Americans an idea for what they think when they think about cults and how they react to them. And by cults, we mean just groups that are on the fringe, right? Very unorthodox. They have strange behaviors, things like that. And so today, we're going to move forward and talk. We're going to go through actually a bunch of different stuff here, starting in the early, what would it be? Let's see here. Make sure I got I'm going ahead a little bit ahead of myself. So talking about the fighting of the sects, right? Fighting the sects, 1870 to 1890. So I should have put late 1800s in the description. I did not do that, however. But the idea is this. We're talking in the book, Mystics and Messiahs, Cults and the New Religions in American History by Philip Jenkins. It's an excellent book. To the extent that I have disagreements, I will bring them up on the show. Though controversy had always surrounded marginal religious groups, it was during the 1870s and 1880s that an accumulation of scandals and exposés led to a public reaction against fringe religions and a demand for official restrictions. The assault was sufficiently intense and widespread to permit us to speak of a cult scare, or at least a national anti-cult reaction. So again, we're talking about a time where media was beginning to spread around. Okay, so you're beginning to see a lot more newspapers, people doing the daily beat, right? Going and publishing things, trying to find stories, oftentimes even becoming sensationalistic, especially as you get closer and closer to Pulitzer, to Hearst, what we call yellow journalism. During that era, you begin to see more and more a sensationalistic, scandalistic drive in the way that news is reported. Well, cults, any group that's super fringe, any group that is shrouded by mystery and secrecy and just simply not knowing exactly what's going on, they are fuel for the fire. And we're going to find this out. And by the way, I like he's got an excellent timeline in here, and I'm not going to go through each and every one, but just to give you a basic idea for the kind of cults that came around at this time. Okay, 1875, you have the Theosophical Society was founded. Okay. You have Charles Nordhoff publishes The Communistic Societies of the United States. That was a book, by the way, that was referenced in Enthusiasm. I think that's the story, if I remember right. That might be the story, or the place where we get the story about the Quaker lady who said she was Jesus and was going to walk on the water, and then right as she was about to, she asked everybody if they believed that she could, and they said yes, and she's like, well, then I'm not going to do it. That lady, right? I think Jemima something, I don't know. Jemima. Yeah, so you have, so Jemima, you have Charles Chinikoy. That's the priest and the woman in the confessional. That's Jack Chick. Jack Chick was heavily inspired by that guy. Mary Baker Eddy with Science and Health. That's Christian Science. That's 1875. In that 1875, 1876. That's what you're talking about. Just in that small amount of time. In 1877, okay, execution of Mormon Bishop John Lee for his part in the Mountain Meadows Massacre. We're going to talk just a little bit about that today. We are going to talk when we get back. I'm going to actually. I should have mentioned this earlier. I'm going to take a little bit of time off. We have some stuff we got to do, taking care of my mother-in-law's home. They were in an accident a year ago, last week, and my brother-in-law died. Mother-in-law is in a nursing home, and so if you could, not only please keep them in prayer, but more than that, if you could, please be patient because we have some stuff we got to do, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Mormonism. Okay. Mormonism, Church of Christian Science. Okay, in 77, you have the publication. You have H.P. Blavatsky, ISIS Unveiled. So you have Blavatsky now with that particular book. 1878, the formation of the Anti-Polygamy Society. So that's actually kind of further into the timeline because Mormonism had actually been around for a minute by this point in time. Okay. 1879, U.S. Supreme Court decides the case of Reynolds v. U.S. We're going to talk about that a little today. That's when you have J.H. Noyes. He goes to the Oneida colony. That's where the male continence issue was brought up. And he's there hanging out with the young ladies. He's hanging out with the young ladies, making sure that everything's fine with them. Yeah, everything's fine with them. And, the young guys, they weren't able to marry. And so they weren't able to do anything until a certain age. And the older guys were having a hard time finding wives. And that's where the defectors happen and stuff like that. Now, he was able to be with the young ladies, the real young ones. And all the virgins, of course, were for him. But that's when we're talking about J.H. Noyes. That's who we're talking about. First Church of Christ Scientist. Okay. First publication of The Watchtower was in 1879. So already... And you can just go up further. Federal Edmunds Act criminalizes polygamy. Okay, Madame Blavatsky in 84 associates accuse her of faking mediumistic phenomena. So that happens in 87. Arthur Conan Doyle publishes A Study in Scarlet, and then of course in 88 you have H.P. Blavatsky, The Secret Doctrine. So you have multiple groups and seminal texts within those groups being published within a span of time of what? 13 years. 13 years. And the involvement of the government, federal, everything. So you have multiple different groups. You have multiple different books that are influencing these groups. You have multiple different court decisions. You have multiple different accusations being made. The development of anti-cult movements, and it's happening pretty rapidly if you think about it, especially for a day and age where they didn't have TV like we do. Okay? They didn't have TV. But the concentration of scandals produced an impression of a broad social threat. Okay? Between 1875 and 1887, public attacks on religious deviants were intense enough to foreshadow the outbreaks of the cult wars that would occur in the 1920s, the 40s, and the late 1970s. Now, he talks about that. He actually has a graphic here. And this graphic, he has a cycle, right? You have the emergence. So he says that it kind of goes in this cycle. You have an emergence of these groups, a reaction to the groups. It's followed by a time of speculation, and then a second peak. And he has one in 1910 to 1935. That'd be the emergence. The reaction, 1925 to 1930. Speculation, 32 to 40. And the second peak would be in the early 40s. And then it happens again within a matter of 15, 20 years. It's right back at it. And he says that this cycle plays itself out not perfectly, right? It's not as if there's an exact number of years that this works, but he says there is a basic structure and a basic order to how this happens. And I've contended, and I'd say it's his too, This is kind of, at least in the United States especially, with the way that our law is set up, with the way that the dominant churches are set up, the way that the presuppositions regarding ecclesiology, hermeneutics, stuff like that, to do with the Bible, how do we interpret the Bible, who has authority to say this or that, the interplay between churches and the state, things like that, that it comes in phases where you may have reactions, or you may have these ideas that come out, and then the people are going to react, right? There's a traditional idea within people that this is outside the ordinary. This is illegitimate. This is heterodox. Even though if you press them on it, they have a really loosey-goosey view of orthodoxy. If you don't have a church that can make that decision and a magisterial tradition that can divide those things, then it really is pretty loose. But that's my point. Because these groups, the way that it will play out in that kind of a system, group emerges, arbitrary reaction to it, and begins to involve the law. The law begins to not be so. The law, contrary to the religious dynamic of this country, the legal dynamic of this country is a far stricter and normative thing. And so they have certain principles and guidelines that they operate off of that are more formal and more applicable across the board than what you would see, for example, with Protestant denominations. So then they end up they're the threshing floor for this, right? The wheat and the chaff, like they're dividing this thing. They're dividing it up. And so after that, there's a speculation time. There's a time where people begin to ask themselves questions. It's not only a speculation, I would say, for the group that's the dominant group in society that's looking with kind of down at the marginal groups and stuff. But more than that, it's also a time where those groups can make adjustments on their own. For example, Oneida is one of those that made the change that they no longer wanted to have complex marriages. The state came down on them, right? The state's like, look, dude, you're totally having sex with little kids, like young girls and stuff. We're coming after you for statutory rape. And you're, everybody's looking at you guys and saying, wait a second, this is messed up. The leader of your group is able to be with the virgins and the young ladies. The young guys are able to practice with the ladies who've reached menopause, and the guys who are older they're struggling to find any wife at all. And this is a weird situation. Eventually, the leader flees to Canada and then conveniently writes a letter and says, hey guys, I think we need to get rid of that whole complex marriage thing I made up. Really? Wow, what a surprise. I'm really surprised. But look, isn't that the way, though? At that point, now they may have other cultic distinctives, but at least the really extreme ones are kind of out the window, okay? And that's good. The statutory rape part. Like we can deal with other things, right? We can deal with weirdness. We can deal with that. But statutory rape, not so much. Not so much. And then you've got the Mormons. The Mormons did it. They did it with polygamy, okay? They did that too. But they did this with polygamy where, it was a huge problem. They ended up taking away land and everything else. What is it? With disincorporate or whatever, the church. And all of a sudden, the leader, the oracle, the president was like, guys, I had a revelation. I had a vision. And the vision is this: we got to stop the polygamy. But you're allowed to do it in heaven. You're still going to have it. I'd love to know, like, what's their explanation for that, by the way? Where are the other wives, man? Where are the other wives, homie? Yeah, real bizarre stuff. Yeah, on this side of the grave. Where are those other wives? Maybe, I'm sure they've come up with something. They literally just pull things out of thin air. So, you're going to be able to just make it up. The tablets, give me a break! From the very beginning, the very first thing, pulling entire history and races of people out of thin air. They can easily come up with some kind of explanation for how they only went through certain ceremonies with their wife on earth, but when they get to heaven, that they're going to have a bunch of wives. Like, they've got to come up with something. But they figured it out, and all of a sudden people were like, well, it is weird, it is definitely cultic and stuff, but at least they're not being all polygamous and junk. Which has ramifications, by the way, beyond the group. And that's what people are most concerned about. Now, partly reflected the outrage, real evidences about fraud and criminal practice in these quarters, but political leaders were also more prepared than hitherto Yeah, I like being able to say that, by the way. More than hitherto. It's like saying betwixt. He was caught betwixt, using the word hitherto or not. Yeah. Hitherto to enforce a degree of Christian religious orthodoxy. So yeah, so you got to think. Back in the day, in the United States, they were all worried, like, are we going to be able to use the government in order to determine not only what is orthodox in our society, but punishing those who are not. But see, they'd already established themselves as a politically polytheistic state at that point. When you don't have a religious test clause and you identify the big daddy G architect God, and that's all you're doing, the big architect, when you do that, you are essentially, it's like the Great Spirit at that point. So I mean, you're not tethering it down as much as a lot of Catholic and Christian apologists would like to do this. And I'd be willing to debate this issue with them. I'd be more than welcome to, more than excited to, in fact. The idea that our founding fathers, our federal founding fathers, were very, very particular about their reasons for saying, why is it that we were the first country to not have an express recognition of the Trinity in this way, with an invocation of God in the ruling document? Why did the colonies have these things? And yet when we came together, that was not the case. And they can say all day long, well, we anticipated that Christian people would just be the only ones that would still do this, and the states would take care of it down below. Yeah, so again, as yourself, those groups can be Trinitarian. You yourself are politically polytheistic. You're a secular group. You're the fake neutral group. You're the where we coexist crowd. So it was a tough deal. It was a tough deal for them. Between 1864 and 1874, evangelicals had sponsored a lively campaign to pass a constitutional amendment that would have formally declared the United States a Christian nation. Yeah. A lively campaign to pass it. That's about as far as you're going to get. Again, you are up against a juggernaut known as political polytheism. It's not going to happen. And that will ultimately affect your society. There's going to be an interplay between your culture and the state. Despite the rhetoric of religious freedom, toleration was extended only grudgingly to groups outside the Judeo-Christian tradition. Toleration did not comprehend Native American religious upsurges like the ghost dance movement, which was brutally suppressed in 1890. Now, the ghost dance movement, right? You have Wovaka. I don't know if you'd pronounce it that way. Jack Wilson, renamed Jack Wilson. Okay, and so it's a dance that he believed would reunite, right, the living and the dead. It would bring, if you did this dance. And I don't know if it's the exact same thing, right? The ghost dance and the round dance. I don't know if it's the same exact thing or if they kind of are very similar to one another. I've actually been to a round dance. If I remember correctly, that's what it was. I've been to a round dance before. I've also been to sweat lodges before, years and years ago. I mean, we're talking like back when I was out of the church, stuff like that. So I've been. We have friends that are very close to us who are Native American. Elder of a tribe, in fact, not far from our home. And so, but the idea was that it would reunite the living and the dead, that you would bring spirits to fight on their behalf. It would end the Western expansion, and it'd bring peace and prosperity and unity to Native Americans. Okay. Now, the Lakota variation tended toward a kind of millenarianism. That was the round dance. Okay, so I think the round dance had a kind of millenarianism that came along with it. Right, this idea of like a millennial reign, right? It was an eschatology for them, an eschatology of triumph. In fact, it'd be a return. Yeah, okay. Jesse said round dance is called powwow. Well, yes, but I think what they're talking about here is a particular. I don't know if they're talking. And correct me if I'm wrong about that. Okay, protect me if I'm wrong. Because I've been to two powwows with this group, but I've also been to a dance where the idea is described here, right? Where you hold hands with the person next to you and you graze your feet along the ground. It's kind of a slide, like a shuffle the whole time. Wilson incorporated some of these some Christian symbolism, including the idea that Jesus was to be reincarnated on earth in 1892. So he thought, you've got, and this is something you see a lot with the Native Americans because of the interplay between them and people that migrated here, okay? People that came here and established the United States of America, right? As a political entity in the interplay, you're going to see an exchange of culture, right? That's going to happen. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But you'll see this a lot with the integration of Christian symbolism or Christian practices. And to a lot of Christian people, they may look at it and say, well, I don't recognize any of this at all. And yet, to them, that's very Christian. And Jesse said, oh, yeah, that is different. My bad. Yeah, it's okay. In the comments, it's all right, dude. Yeah, I'm glad you guys are on the ball about this, by the way. He's said to have claimed power over weather, and the God would be dividing the U.S. into the East and the West, and he would be deputy over the West, and that evil would be swept away. In fact, it's interesting because when this came around, the Mormons went to investigate this, which is hilarious if you think about it. You would think, you'd say, okay, so you have, in this situation, you have a cult at everybody at the time's like, oh yeah, Mormonism for sure. And they're going like, we got to get our monocles out. Hold on. We got the monocles. The Mormons are like, okay. They're like, look, we got to go and investigate this ourselves. It's like the Jehovah's Witnesses, right? Or Russell, I'm so sorry. Charles Taze Russell. It's him going around. I'm going to do an investigation on a number of things. And you're like, that guy? Really? Yeah, I'm gonna go and investigate it, make sure stuff's going fine. I want to actually stay away a little bit from the Mormon issue, other than to say it turned violent. I mean, you had the Meadows Massacre, 1857. Okay, and actually, let me say this real quick. Let me say this. I actually had this up for a good reason. Let's see. I have it. Okay, Ghost Dance. So when talking about the Ghost Dance right here, it was saying that during a time, let me make sure, okay. Yeah. So this just over at Wikipedia. Political influence. In February 1890, the United States government broke a Lakota treaty by adjusting the Great Sioux By adjusting the Great Sioux Reservation of South Dakota, an area that formerly encompassed the majority of the state, and breaking it up into 5 smaller reservations. So yes, there's a constant record of treaties being broken. Okay, this is true. And when this happens, the people in a minority position end up oftentimes resorting to things that are extremely mystical, right? Because they know that they don't have the power in and of themselves. And so they're appealing to the divine. They've got to figure out something. And in fact, this is one of the criticisms, in fact. You have, when people turn to the Ghost Dance ritual, it frightened the supervising agents of the BIA. Those who'd been residing in the area for a long time recognized that the ritual was often held shortly before a battle was to occur. Kicking Bear was forced to leave Standing Rock. But when the dances continued unabated, Agent James McLaughlin asked for more troops. There was a former agent, Valentine McGillicuddy. He saw nothing extraordinary in the dances, and he ridiculed the panic that seemed to have overcome the agencies. This is what he said. Quote, and this is something, I want you to think about this, okay? Because this puts into context. I mean, this old Valentine McGillicuddy. How would you like that name? It's kind of dope a little bit. Yeah, Valentine McGillicuddy. He saw nothing extraordinary about it, but he saw something extraordinary, in fact. He did. And what he saw was this, quote, the coming of the troops has frightened the Indians. If the Seventh-day Adventists prepared the ascension robes for the second coming of the Savior, the United States Army is not put in motion to prevent them. Why should not the Indians have the same privilege? If the troops remain, trouble is sure to come. And what he's pointing out, he may not have even fully understood or appreciated the significance of that. But it is to say that a lot of times when and there is an irony when you have a group like Walter Martin, who wrote the book Kingdom of the Cults, and he's criticizing other groups because they are outside of Orthodox Protestantism, whatever that actually means. That's just an agreed upon. There's no authority that can say, well, that's Orthodox over there. That's a legitimate theory, because you could believe in infant baptism, you could believe in believer baptism, you could believe in infant baptism, you could believe in an ordinance or a sacrament. So you don't have to agree with any of that. You could believe in pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib rapture, pre-wrath rapture, pre, mid, post-millennial, doesn't matter. You could have different ideas. There are multiple different ideas that Protestants could have, including, for example, with Walter Martin. He was, if I remember right, part of the Baptist tradition as well as a charismatic. That was definitely considered on the fringe before. They were handling serpents. I mean, come on, dude. And so the thing is that, people will look at this and they'll say, well, why is it? Why is it that some groups who do these crazy things, preparing for the rapture, preparing for the end of the world and getting the ascension robes and everything else, why do we say that's legit? And yet we get spooked about these things. If you are within a legal and cultural context that is politically polytheistic. If the state isn't able to make any decision regarding one's dogmas, and they can only base it off of practices, what do you do when those dogmas are put into practice? And what do you do if it's only private? That's one of the crazy things, in fact, about serpent handling. You're allowed to jump out of a plane. You're allowed to do a host of things, be a race car driver, NASCAR driver. You're allowed to do those planes. What are they? Are they hydroplanes? Right? Those boats that go super fast and you see the wrecks of those things. Super dangerous, man. You're allowed to do that. But then when somebody believes this based on a religious conviction that is shared, by the way, private interpretation according to your best natural lights and the perspicuity of Scripture, that if you do that somehow that doesn't qualify. You can't ask them on what standard, in honesty, and this might be a really sad thing to a lot of my conservative and libertarian friends, is that the answer at the end of the day is just pure raw power. Arbitrary wielding of power. At the end of the day. But what happened? People died. People died. Thousands of additional U.S. Army troops were deployed to the reservation. On December 15th, 1890, Sitting Bull was arrested for failing to stop his people from practicing the ghost dance. During the incident, one of Sitting Bull's men catched the bear, fired at Lieutenant Bullhead, striking his right side. He instantly wheeled and shot Sitting Bull, hitting him in the left side, between the 10th and 11th ribs. This exchange resulted in deaths on both sides, including that of Sitting Bull. You can go to Wounded Knee, same thing, right? The role that it played. So it's a serious issue. 1870s, you had the rise of these books. Okay, the rise of these books against Brigham Young, his apostate wife. That was Brigham Young's apostate wife wrote a book called Wife Number 19, a complete expose of Mormonism. And by Brigham Young's apostate wife, I don't even know if we ever fully figured out who that was. I'm not sure. But the polygamy question, I'm going to save, by the way, I'm going to save a lot of this stuff. I'm skipping over a lot about the Mormons. We're going to save a lot about the Mormons for an episode. We're going to do, I think, probably 3 episodes specifically dedicated to dealing with Mormonism. So we're going to talk about the history of the Mormon Church, as we always do, the sweet soap opera drama of the Mormon leaders and all of their wives and the kind of crazy massacre stuff going on. And the accusations, the conspiracies, the ridiculous ideas of their religion's origin, the obviously, blatantly clear and evident on its face, phony nature of their origin and their documents, their sacred books. We're going to talk about that. It's going to be bunches of fun. We're going to prepare you so that way, if they ever do come knocking on your door, they will know that they are up against someone who's watched PaleocratDiaries. I think I'm on their blacklist, by the way. They used to come over to the house and they're like, don't go there. We've got a blacklist now. Don't go to Jeremiah Bannister. No, don't go there. That guy, man, when you talk to these folks and you see one of them, because they always come in groups where like one is kind of the more like, hey, what's going on, dude? You want to hear about the Mormon Church? It's really great. It's super great. And you're like, oh, wow, yeah. He's kind of charismatic and fun. And then the other guy is kind of quiet, but you know that's the smart one. That's the guy who's done lots of study in his room, probably alone. So that cat is the one you got to deal with. Don't deal with the jazzy jazz guy. Okay, that dude's just glad to be part of the group. In fact, he's probably got some hot chicks back waiting for him. Mormons, not gonna lie, Mormons as a group, it's like I think it's one of the preconditions to be in the Mormon church. If you're a lady, is you've got to be from a gene pool of rather attractive ladies. It's just true. It's just true. It's a fact. Statistically proven. It's like drinking coffee through a straw, right? Straight to the dome, bypasses that blood-brain barriers. It's scientifically proven. But the polygamy question now led to one of the most sweeping episodes of religious persecution in American history. From 1862, federal anti-polygamy laws threatened the whole legal basis of the religion and invalidated Utah's laws sanctioning multiple marriage. So you have it causes a huge uproar. So, I mean, people are extremely interested in the conversations regarding heterodox groups, fringe groups with strange beliefs, because this has come to dominate the scene in much the same way. In fact, it's following the same template, as we said, of the Catholic controversy. But the Catholics survived it. And not only did they survive it, but because they survived it and they lived through that time of speculation and that second spike, once they made it through there, and that happened with them, they were able to then, even if it was a strange bedfellow situation, they were able at that point, they were able to communicate as part of the group, as part of the cultural enterprise that is going against the cults. So they were part of the anti-cult movement, even though they were, not long before, they were, and to many people still were. And you got to imagine the kind of frustration. You may have experienced it yourself. Have you been somebody who's gone to a pro-life, a group that is working together, a coalition for anything to do with pro-life, and you see Mormons in the group? Have you ever had a hard time with them? I have. In fact, I got in a big enough debate with one of them that it ended up sparking a controversy that resulted in a third party having a major time emergency convention that literally split that third party in half. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. Over pro-life. Because of their views of ensoulment. It's a different deal. But through this, it wasn't just them. It was so this brought attention and cast light on the idea of these heterodox religious groups with weird practices going out to a different place to set up their own land, right? And all of them had kind of a mythology about them, right? That they're like a second Israel. America had it of herself. This idea of her mission, this idea of what she was in the world, in fleeing from Europe and coming here, fleeing religious persecution, coming. And by the way, the people who fled, we have this weird thing where we just treat the pilgrims like they're just run-of-the-mill folks. We talked about those groups in the book Enthusiasm. Some real weirdos, by the way. Some real weird beliefs. Yeah. But this brought to attention the idea of the communes. The communes were attracting critical interest in these years, accusations that they were being usurped by dictatorial and authoritarian self-appointed spiritual elites. That's easy to, isn't that kind of still the deal? If you talk to somebody and that person comes up, in fact, just think in your head, have you ever talked to somebody who's part of an actual commune? Have you ever been to one? I have. I have been to a couple of them, in fact. One of them was USA. Jesus People USA. And there were accusations for a long time regarding sexual deviancy. Of course, later, it completely ravaged them. It brought enormous amounts of shame on the organization. There's a documentary about it, actually. And so, but when you think about them, when you think about groups that are communes, and if you've ever been to one, or if you ever have spoken to someone who's like, man, you should consider joining our religion if you checked out our new zine. You should come and play hack-a-sack with us. We make really great bread, and we have a lot of cool beads. And you're like, okay, you got a cult? And you're like, no, it's not a cult, man. It's a commune. Yeah, we have certain views. What are your initial thoughts? What are the things that come to mind even from your experience? What would they be? I know what comes to mind. You heard a little bit of it just now. Kind of the arts and crafts style stuff, hippie, right, kind of alternative kind of folks. Dreadlocks maybe. Hacky sack with sandals, kind of thing. You can tell it was around the Jesus people. And we'll talk about Jesus people when we talk about the charismatic movement. 1875, Charles Nordhoff, in the Communist Societies of the United States, published sympathetic accounts of groups as diverse as the Zorrites, the Icarians, and the Shakers. I'm going to, on the next episode, I'll look up the Zorrites and the Icarians. I don't know much about them. And we'll talk about the Shakers. There's a video, maybe I'll play it one of these days over at the Wolfpack. In the description below, the Wolfpack chat, we'll do a stream. We may do a stream today, actually, it's a different topic. We won't talk about it. But there's a video, and we'll watch a video. I forget what video some of them have selected that they would really like to see. It might be F is for Faker. It's an Orson Welles documentary kind of thing. Really, really good. So we may end up seeing that. But Charles also described one of the harrowing group criticism meetings by means of which the Oneida group maintained internal order. Of much more concern to the critics was the liberated sexual ambience of Oneida. Is it Oneida or Oneida? I think it's Oneida. Which encouraged the idea that commune was simply a code word, of course, for, group sex. And isn't that another one of these things that oftentimes goes hand in hand that you begin to think, yeah, this might actually have a little bit to do with this. And maybe it's influenced by the ideas of the 60s, right? The 60s and 70s. Some of the ideas regarding these cults, right? The New Age cults, the Source family, and other stuff like that. And you're like, oh, yeah, man. Oh, yeah, they're definitely into that free love nonsense. That's actually been going on for a minute. In the case of Oneida, that was not, in fact, free love. That was actually very, very difficult to come by. That was scarcity. Especially if you were a dude who was not, the leader and stuff. At that point, you had yourself a serious issue. Okay, so right here. Pubescent youngsters were encouraged to enter freely into communal sex life. The community head, J.H. Noyes, was often the one to offer the initiation to girls of 12 or 13. Of course he was. Of course. He's like, look. This is like literally, hey, little girl, I got a lollipop. That's really what we're talking about. This guy's a real sicko. And he figured it out. He figured out the perfect combination. The perfect combination was to have been, gone to a prestigious school, have been kicked out of that prestigious school, having lived life a very, pretty perk-free life, silver spoon style thing. And he ends up being kicked out of Yale because he's preaching this crazy doctrine that there's no such thing as sin. Yeah, Yale's come a long way. Yale's come a long way since then. They're like, oh, actually, we feel badly for having kicked him out. We kind of believe that now. Yeah. It's gotten wicked bad. And so the thing is, you sit there and you say, okay, so he gets kicked out and he says that he no longer sins. He's got a perfect heart. I'm perfectly pure. I can't sin. Why? Because my heart is so good. My heart is so pure. Trust me. Hey, little 12 and 13-year-old girl, you want to go in my room with me? Oh, this guy's pure, all right. Yeah. Do not hire him as the babysitter. If there's a movie, Babysitter's Club, and that guy is the leader of it, do not hire them. That is not a Babysitter's Club you want anything to do with. Believe you me. As if it's any doubt. Can you imagine seeing the poster for that? That bugger's like, I babysit, I'm real good. And you're like, do you have any experience? No, but I have a perfectly pure heart and I am above sin. Really, you are? Yes, because nobody in society or scripture or saints or nobody can tell me anything I do is wrong. I'm that good. And you're like, yeah, I don't know if that sounds too good to be true. And by too good to be true, I mean literally, get out of my house. Get out of here, you sicko. I know what you're trying to do. What a sicko. By 1879, the clergy and media were pressing for prosecution. They used an ominous analogy. Okay, the Oneida community as far worse in their practices than the polygamists of Utah. So do you see how each wave of this, each group that comes, kind of helps again to set a standard for what people expect in the way that they're framed. So if you have the Mormons, right, which ended up being, I mean, obviously way, way, way bigger, like not even close to the Oneida group, okay, not even close to them, and you're comparing that group to them. You can see what that would do to any group. Now they live under the fear that they're going to be associated with these groups that just, I mean, they went through hell and back. It was rough. It was difficult, like all out war at times. Literally guns, people dying, going to jail, crazy stuff. And you'd have to know that if you wanted to start some weird group, even if you genuinely, let's say you're just a real loon bird. Let's say you're just a real quackadoodle. And you decide, you feel that you've been in the ghost, right? And you've had the revelation. You've had the good trip. And the Lord has told you to start this commune over here somewhere with some weird beliefs. You got to know that there's a societal pressure. And that societal pressure is going to demand an awful lot of you. If you start getting big enough and you aren't incorporated into society around you, you're going to incur the wrath of society. That's like, in a strange way, an outrage mob, because they don't have any standard by which, what would be the standard by which to say that that group, if you changed and believed this, or you changed and you did that you'd be accepted. None of them have authority. None of them claim to. Well, the vast majority don't. Right? Overwhelming majority of Protestant religions, non-Catholic religions, do not claim authority like the Catholic Church or the Orthodox Church, and some very, very few and most often small. You could add the Mormons in there, of course. Their group, Jehovah's Witnesses, would be in that group, that they have an idea regarding infallibility and the authority, competency, and jurisdiction to make rules of universal application, or at least to their group. Right, but that it's true, and it would be binding. That if people denied it, there'd be consequences to that. But the society as a whole does not. It's an outrage mob, and it's similar to the outrage mob right now, because what it is would be to say, look, a lot of times it's based on phony ideas. To be frank, you can disagree with the cult, and at the same time realize that they probably don't have babies underneath the building. Right? You are able to, in fact, anybody studying the history of cults in these groups would find that the accusations being made against them in real time, more often than not, were way overblown. And by way overblown, I mean the difference between, yeah, that's a heresy, and oh my gosh, this guy's raping kids and killing them in sacrifices. That's like a dramatic thing, man. That's literally dramatic. And the idea was that we are going to take is like vigilantism. In a way, right? They'd come after them. There all sorts of lies, slander, libel. And the answer at the end of the day was lawfare. It was lawfare. Outrage mobs have been around for a long time. And sometimes they wear crosses around their neck. It's true. Especially when people like that live in a system that, for whatever reason, they didn't recognize the writing on the wall of a founding document that was politically polytheistic. It's a tough deal. It's a lot of cognitive dissonance within a culture. And only one group carries a sword. By 1879, okay, the clergy and media were pressing for prosecution, right? 2 years later, the commune received more scandalous publicity when one of its alumni assassinated President Garfield. The culprit, Charles Guiteau, had been a member of Oneida Group from 1860 to 1866, leaving in part because of the impossibility of finding a sexual partner. So that guy, what would they call them now? What do they call them? When those dudes, when men are not able to find women, they end up doing. There was a guy that did that, right? I forget what the. It's a derogatory term that's used. Maybe in the comment section, maybe you guys can post that on there. By the way, if you want anything to any question or comment directed to me during the show, make sure to put at Paleocrat. Okay. Guiteau was a profound believer in spiritualism, and he blamed the spirits for motivating him to undertake the key decisions of his life, including the attack on Garfield. Same thing, you have Thomas Lake Harris, originally a spiritualist and a Swedenborgian minister. He operated a series of communes from 1850 onwards, and he led a sect known as the Brotherhood of New Life, which ruled autocratically as man, seer, adept, and avatar. So imagine that cat. Imagine that dude. You're like, hey, bro, what do you do for a living? He's like, I am the man, the seer, the adept, and the avatar. And you're like, oh, dude, so you play Pokemon or something? You into that role play? You into that? You Dungeons and Dragons? What are you? What is that, homie? Harris preached a complex sexual mysticism. So they're not making it easy on themselves. They presume the existence of both masculine and feminine divine spirits. Believers were urged to find their spiritual counterparts. Would that be kind of like your feminine side? Is that a little bit of that? Find your feminine side? For chicks to find their butch side? Is that what that is? Believers were urged to find their spiritual counterparts with whom they would beget spiritual offspring. Though commune members apparently lived in strict chastity, tales of orgies, wife-swapping, ritual nudity, and child molestation followed the Brotherhood from the late 1860s onward. Of course, criticized also was the idea of breaking up earthly families and removing children from their parents. You hear this a lot. That's one of the norms that you hear about. You'll hear a suspicion of this. You know, if you have a family member in a cult and all of a sudden one of them defects, there's a lot of times a fear, and maybe rightly so, that cult is going to press the remaining believing spouse to quite possibly, if they cannot bring that person back, to leave that person and to remarry somebody inside of the cult. It's a real thing. It's been going on for a minute. There's another system, which predictably boomed following the Civil War, as thousands of grieving families sought to contact their lost loved ones. That, of course, was spiritualism. The movement, right, was discredited by copious evidence of fraudulent mediums, particularly the racket and spirit photography. Have you seen any of those pictures? I used one of those pictures in the profile. I try to do that every time, using some kind of picture in the thumbnail that harkens back to the group that we're going to talk about. Let's see. In which photographic images were crudely retouched to suggest the presence of a ghost. Like you could see stuff where it's like coming out of their mouth. It's uber fake, man. Super dupe nonsense. Super dupe fake. The pioneer of the process went on trial in 1869. In 1882, the Society for Psychical Research was formed, and it publicized the extensive evidence of trickery and deception found amongst the vast majority of mediums examined. Okay? So that's where you start to have people that are going in and finding, they're investigating, and they're actually doing the work. And that's one of the things that I strongly encourage, not just an apologetic that says, you know, here's the case, the argument we can make on our own, but to really investigate these groups, to investigate their claims. Houdini did it. And I'm grateful for it. So did, and it's sad that so many of these groups that do that end up being atheist groups. That's an unfortunate thing, in fact, like Randy, James Randi. We can thank him, by the way, for Peter Popoff, the phony faith preacher and miracle worker that sat there with the little microphone in his ear and his wife communicating to him through it with him, to talk about prayer cards that were filled out by people in attendance and trying to track where they were sitting, and then her communicating that to her husband and being outed because of a knowledge of technology and a suspicion that this was happening. Remarkable story, by the way. Christians should really be at the forefront of that. By the 1880s, spiritualism had to a large extent lost its niche in high society. The most damaging involved Margaret Fox. On joining the Catholic Church, Fox published a full confession of this horrible deception perpetrated by her sister and herself. The idea, they had these knocks and clicks. And they said that when these mysterious knocks and clicks had been quite material things, which the young girls had done by rapping with their feet or manipulating the joints of their toes and their fingers. She demonstrated the entire technique to a journalist for Pulitzer's New York World. She summoned answers from the beyond, including ones from Abraham Lincoln and Napoleon. Obligingly stated through rapping that he had known the journalist well 80 years before. It was literally beatboxing. That's what they meant by rapping. These girls were rapping it up. Yeah. That's what they were doing. They're sitting there cracking their knuckles, and you're like, yeah, come on. Although she would later recant her recantation, the whole affair was ruinous. Theosophy. The Theosophical Society was formed in New York City, 1875, by Helena P. Blavatsky and Henry Olcott, both of whom had a long-standing interest in seances and mediumship. Here's the thing, and we'll go into more detail about this. I want to be able to get to other stuff, though, because we're going to go deeper into theosophy, okay? So kind of like Mormonism, I don't want to go deep into it other than to say just a basic idea of what it was and what was the downfall. Theosophical movement integrated spiritualist ideas with a great deal of Hindu and Buddhist thought, including the theories of karma and reincarnation. The movement also offered an extensive history of human civilizations dating back millions of years through the time of Atlantis. Wow, that's amazing. So they figured it out. She's like, yes, I have the history of the universe. And you're like, really? And they're like, Atlantis. And you're like, what? What are you talking about? How do you know that? Through the masters of what? The universe. The masters of the universe. And you're like, oh my gosh, lady. They talked to me. Blavatsky claimed to have attained her wisdom in hidden lamasseries in Tibet and Central Asia. Oh, so they were hidden. Oh, of course they were. Where'd you do that? It's a secret. It's a secret. Oh, it's a secret? Yeah. Well, who was there? The masters of the universe. Okay, I hear you. So she found secret texts. Wow. Yeah. So she found these secret, basically like tablets, right? The sacred scrolls. She figured it out. The imaginary stanzas of the Zion. Or Dijan. How would you pronounce that? D-Z-Y-A-N. She also relied on materials channeled from great supernatural masters. You know, I've seen dudes like that. There's some dudes they've got public access channels, and they're wearing gold medallions, looking like Flava Flav, the cultic version of Flava, and the cultic Flava. The cultic Flava Flav is what they are, right? So these cats. Oh, man. So these cats, they get on there, and they're like, yes, well, actually, she was wrong because the real masters have told me blah, blah, blah. And people are like, oh, yes, that's so wise. And then somebody stands up in the back and they're like, you're a liar. And it's like, how dare you? Well, I spoke to the master too. You did? Yes. And the master told me this. Oh, yeah, the master told me this. Yeah, you. And it just goes back and forth and back and forth. And these people all claim the mediumship. They're all like, oh, yeah, I have the power. I got the skills. I got the gift to see into the totally fake world of I made everything up land. Yeah, the Great White Brotherhood, a select club that included Jesus. Oh, so imagine this. This is like the all-star team. It included Jesus, Buddha, Confucius, Mesmer, and Cagliostro, as well as real-life occultists that she had consulted over the years. The problem, of course, was she's writing these letters, of course, saying that she was like being controlled, like, you know, she's a medium and it's working through her and stuff. And people started to say, well, look, we can actually analyze that. That's like I said about these faith healers. We should be monitoring that situation and saying, look, I have watched your stuff. You can see how many people you lay hands on. Nobody's getting healed. And so if they go up and say, oh, all these praise reports, you say, on what basis? You could not. There's no way you could count that. You're literally lying to people. Unless you have magic eyeballs. Oh, well, God showed me in my spirit. Oh, I bet he did. Well, it would be great if maybe the Lord would consider doing that as well. Your Lord, lowercase l, your Lord, right? Mr. Potato Head, silly, putty, nonsense, fake God that you've got, that he would show us on camera as well. Wouldn't that be a great testimony? We'd be able to all see it, because right now, every bit of physical, verifiable evidence, falsifiable evidence that the universe has is that you are phony baloney. You are phone ballones, brother. And of course, you got, you know, lots of trouble. Literary fraud, plagiarism, constantly directed. And it was also directed against the Mormon scriptures as well. We'll talk about those charges as well. But now the wrapping everything up. Actually, hold on. It was another, what's the other group I had up here? Oh, yeah, okay. I want to just mention this about another commune. So here's another one, right? There was the House of David. Where actually is that mentioned? Okay, that's mentioned in here. All right. American journalism experienced a revolution of the 1880s, inaugurated by Joseph Pulitzer's acquisition of the New York World in 1883. The Pulitzer Press pioneered the modern era of crusading exposés, the quote-unquote new journalism, also known less flatteringly as yellow journalism. The tradition was pushed to even greater lengths after William Randolph Hearst bought the New York Journal in 1895. So this is where you start to see scandalous, sensational media. Big time. Now, it's always been that way. But this is like that on steroids. This is like bringing it all there. Pedal to the metal. No holds barred. And they covered different controversial figures, including, of course, the Watchtower Society, Christian Science, the Emmanuel Movement. What is the? I'm going to underline this because I don't know. Oh, wait. Is that the Emmanuel? This might be the Emmanuel Movement right here. I think. Let me just make sure, because I don't want to end up going ahead of this. No, it's coming up. So the Emmanuel group. Okay. Right here. One controversial figure that was being reported on was a guy by the name of John Alexander Dowie, who practiced spiritual healing until 1895, when he was denounced by the Chicago Tribune for unlicensed practice of medicine. By 1901, he had founded a theocratic commune at Zion City, Illinois. Zion City is where the founder of the college that I went to, Christ for the Nations, where he ended up, that's where he grew up. Okay. Now, some modern trads might think this guy is mega based in some ways. He believed that the earth was flat. He declared himself Elijah the Restorer, which Mary's little remnant, that cat, Ibrahim, is going to be he's like, no, I'm Elijah the Restorer. yell at them, you know, have a peeing contest to find out who gets that title. He believed that the earth was flat and was described as a paranoid swindler. I was like, oh yeah, of course. I mean, obviously. The guy's obviously a paranoid swindler. I mean, he probably wears it on his sleeve. He probably has a shirt that lets everybody know. Kind of like he had one of those old Model Ts or whatever, and on the side had Big Pimp Daddy Cult Master spray painted on it. Letting everybody know, of course I'm a paranoid swindler. I mean, come on. That's my title here. He even dressed up in the robes of like the Old Testament priesthood and stuff. Right? With the breastplate and all that. I'm not joking. He really did. The affairs of Zion City offered lively scandal to the press until the settlement finally was burned to the ground in 1937. Just as eccentric as Dowie was Dr. Cyrus Artide. Yeah, this guy's not too nuanced, though, who adopted a range of quasi-Hindu and reincarnationist beliefs. He also preached that the world was hollow and that we're living inside of it. So he's like, oh, I will take your dome and I will up the ante. We are inside the earth. We're inside of it. And you're like, well, what? We're on Earth? No, we are in it right now. You're like, you're in it? Holy cow, yes. That is the dome. Above us is the earth. And above that is what? A dome. To what? An earth. What is it, man? Where does this end? T developed a colony of true believers at the Church Triumphant in Florida, where he took the messianic name Koresh, recalling the Hebrew title of the biblical king Cyrus. He survived until 1906. His sect survived into the 1940s. After his death, his disciples kept watch over his body in expectation of his resurrection. So you got to think. Okay? So he dies. Survived into the 40s. After his death, his followers are like, they're watching over his body. They're waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting. And finally they give up. Why? Because it started to decompose. Imagine being one of those weirdos and they're like, come on, you can do it. You can do it, boss. Come on, you can do it. And they're like, oh, it's getting gross in here. Kids walking in, having that gag reflex. I'm so sorry. Should we imagine the conversation? Should we keep him in here? Yes, give him more time. At night, the husband's crying. He walks in. The wife's like, sweetheart, it's okay. We must continue to believe. And he's like, I know, but it's harder. Why is it harder to believe? He's not alive anymore. I know, but that's how he can reincarnate. I know, sweetheart, but he's literally decomposing. His nose is falling off. Come on. Oh, man. Whew. After his death, his disciples kept watch over his body. Yeah, it didn't happen. All right. Now, the end. We're going to end with this. House of David. We're done. And remember, after the show, we are going to go ahead and go straight to the Wolfpack chat in the description below. You're going to see the link. You can find that. It's t.me/the Wolfpack chat for the live Q&A. It's interactive. We can talk about today's topics or any topic on any show that we've done so far, including enthusiasm, Lassance, the Snake Handlers, the Word of Faith movement, secular age, and of course, anything to do, Kingdom of the Cults, New Apostolic movement, any of the topics that have come up, and any topic that you would like to talk about. So basically, anything. So you can just join that. Make sure to join it. Make sure to sign up and join us there. It's a really good time. Okay, and it's 60 minutes long. So we talk for 60 minutes, shut down the video, and then continue if people want to continue talking and have it open up. Much more substantial was the House of David group, which provided a remarkable link with the most extreme sectarian movements of the 18th century. The movement traced its spiritual ancestry to the revelations of Joanna Southcott, the English prophetess of the 1790s, who claimed to be the first in a sequence of divine messengers who would usher in the end times. Oh my gosh! Okay, so Joanna Southcott? I hadn't heard of Joanna Southcott. And they're like, oh yeah, she's gonna bring in the end times. She's a prophetess. Really? I never heard of her. Pass me the scallops. We'll talk more about Joanne Southcott. English prophetess. Claimed to be the first in a sequence, so at least she didn't set herself up too bad. She's like, no, I'm not the first. I'm the first, but I'm not the last. It's actually a sequence of them. By the 1890s, the Flying Rollers, or Israelites, had formed a communal settlement headed by Michael Mills of Detroit. At the turn of the century, however, Mills went the way of many other messiahs and was convicted of statutory rape of a young colony member during a religious rite. Now, House of David, formerly the Israelite House of David, Communal Religious Society, Benjamin and Mary Purnell in Benton Harbor, Michigan. Okay? They're the ones basing their doctrines off that. Today, it's funny, there's actually a handful of members that are still there. Like, I'd like to talk to these cats and say, they're like, wait, bring them in and say, okay, so like, what do you guys believe now? Like, what is life like for you? Because they're like the Uber remnant, Like, they're like, it doesn't matter if we are the only ones. There's like 3 of them. That's even less people than voted for Pope Michael. I mean, you're really getting down there at that point. You're the mega remnant. You're not even a megazord anymore. You're just a Zord. A couple Zords. In 1888, the Purnells discovered a group of preachers extolling a man named James Jersham Jezreel. You're like, JJJ, that's what they call me. James Jersham Jezreel. I'm the sixth messenger. Oh, you're the sixth one. Jezreel had published 3 books, okay, known as the Extract Sermons from the Flying Roll. I got to read this thing. I got to see what this is. While the preachers were in Richmond, right, they joined a group known as the Visitation Movement, started by Joanna Southcott, the first messenger, okay, studying the writings of Jezreel, the 7th. He said he was the 7th and the last messenger, was soon to be on the scene. So he's prophesying, there's going to be another one. Allegedly mentioned, of course, in Revelation 10:7. And then, on March 12th, 1895, the world was graced with the Purnells. The people, they're like, that's us. We're here. We're here. Yay. The spirit of Shiloh had grafted with them to become the 7th and last messenger. Them as the messenger. Plural. Okay, yeah. Prior to that, the Purnells lived in Fostoria, Ohio, and had 2 children, one of whom died in a fireworks factory explosion at the age of 17. The Purnells were looked down upon by residents of the city when they decided to forego the funeral. And why? Due to their beliefs of not having anything to do with the dead. Of course, including their own child. In other words, they were bona fide card-carrying scumbags. They were scumbags. Exploitative scumbag losers. That's what they were. A similar teaching had been promoted decades earlier by Charles Taze Russell, okay, about church ages in which you claim to be the 7th and final messenger of the ages as foretold by the book. Charles Taze Russell concerning himself, and in fact, it may have been an influence on Purnell. Now, they had a commune, had its own cannery, carpenter shop, coach factory, tailor shop, steam laundry. They owned and operated their own electricity plant, providing lighting to the community, had 3 brass bands and 2 orchestras, and a zoological garden. Of course, there was a problem. 13 young women testified under oath to the courts that they'd had sexual relations with the patriarch while still minors. This is one of those things that it just keeps coming up. Eventually, after the trial, right, he ends up dying before he could even be sentenced, right? So it divided the group into 2. One of those was headed by Mary Purnell, so she stuck around, right? As of 2017, it maintained a handful of members, and they kept the premises open to the public. A second one maintained the original commune, the old House of David, led by Judge T.H. Dewhurst. Dewhurst. I need to figure out more about this judge cat. Seems like that's one of those things where, like, if you got a cult, you better have a judge with you. It gives a sense of, like, dignity, you know? Especially because you know that you're going to be looking down the barrel of the state in not too long from now. As of 2010, the group was reported to have how many members? How many members do you think? 3. 3 members. And they're sticking around. They're like, come on, you got to keep going. Oh, imagine that group. But see, what's weird about this, man, these cats were actually really interesting. Purnell was a sports enthusiast. Oh, he was an enthusiast. Yeah, of course he was. But he was a sports enthusiast. He encouraged the members of the Israelite community to play sports, especially baseball, to build physical and spiritual discipline. Right? They played competitive ball. And in fact, they played a grueling schedule. Became famous as a barnstorming team, which toured rural America from the 1920s to the 1950s. Played amateur and semi-pro teams in exhibition games because they were wanting to make money for the people back home. And it allowed them to share their beliefs. The team members wore long hair and beads as they played, but apparently they were actually pretty good. Some professional players, in fact, Grover Cleveland Alexander, Satchel Paige, Mordecai Brown, professional players grew their beards out to show respect for the God of Israel, while others wore false beards. Some of them were like, I'm showing respect. I'm growing my beard out. And the other guy's like, hey, give me that one with the tape on it. Like, we're out of tape. Give me the glue. I don't care. Just glue that bugger on my face. They were known for their skill. In fact, the House of David teams were famous for inventing pepper baseball tricks along the lines of fancy basketball moves of the Harlem Globetrotters. So if you see those kind of tricks, you're literally thank a cult for that. They also had a musical band. They fielded nationally known musical bands between 1906 and 1927. They toured the country almost nonstop on the 3 top vaudeville circuits: the Pantages, the Keith, and the Orpheum. And if you look at them, man, these dudes in 1915, and these guys were like straight up hippies at the time. They had the long hair and stuff. I mean, I'm dead serious. You got to see these pictures. I ain't even lying. They had a world famous zoo and an amusement park. And they brought it back. They brought it back. In fact, they're one of the few amusement parks in the United States that have ever been able to successfully reopen. I got to go. I got to go to this amusement park. I got to check this thing out, you know what I mean? I got to do it. I got to start traveling and go to these places and do videos where I do walkthroughs and show you where these people are and stuff, and like what their beliefs are, what their land is like, see some of the landmarks and stuff like that. The intensity of the criticism directed against fringe religions did not necessarily impede their growth or discourage the emergence of ever newer cults. But all the emerging movements faced deep hostility from the media and other critics who now lumped the new creeds together under the suspicious title of cults. And that right there is the end of chapter 2 in our book, Mystics and Messiahs. That's the end of chapter 2. Yeah, simply put. And so remember, let me go ahead and make sure that I've got this all lined up here. Yeah, make sure that So make sure that you have, there we go, that you have the link down below. Make sure you go right away. Because, why? Because we're going there right now. We're going there right now. Find the link that says t.me/thewolfpackchat. You got to go. And when you get there, say hi to everybody. I can promise you that we are glad that you're there. I can promise you that. I can promise you that we are better with you than without you. Because it's true. We literally believe the more the merrier. And we live it out in such a way that you know it's true. The more the merrier. We are genuinely excited that you are there. You make us better. And we hope to do the same for you. Back and forth until the end of days. Whether the Lord comes back, right, in the general scheme, or whether we in fact are brought up to him because, we die. And it's going to come for us. Death is crouching at our door. It always is. Every day, even while we sleep. It's why we pray the way we do. Because we know that it can happen. It's happened so many times before. And so we resolve here to never give up, to keep on smiling, to remember we're going to die, to dream bigger thoughts, to take a knee for Christ the King, to give it all we've got. Thought, word, deed. And the best way that we can do that is not by ourselves, unless we're called to be hermits or something. But unless we're called to be hermits, it's better that we're together. It's better that we come together and say, you've got a gift, you've got a talent, so do I. And if I haven't figured it out or you haven't figured it out, let's work together. Let's pray real hard, do a novena. Let's give glory to God in everything we do. Arm in arm, Catholic solidarity, for a world that desperately needs us. For a world filled with heretics and schismatics, enthusiasts and fanatics, and crazy cults too. Until next time, never give up, keep on smiling, and memento mori.
I wanted to make people dream bigger thoughts.